Imagine waking up in a hospital. The first thing you see is the face of a woman, her eyes filled with tears of relief. She holds your hand, her touch both desperate and gentle, and she calls you by name. She says she's your wife, and you have absolutely no idea who she is. You feel nothing, no recognition, no connection. She is a total stranger. This isn't a scene from a movie. For one man, this was the beginning of a journey into the deepest, most terrifying mystery of the human brain. What are we without our memories? Before the accident, David and Sarah were inseparable. Theirs was a love story built over 2 decades, a tapestry woven from a million tiny threads. The inside jokes whispered in crowded rooms, the shared comfort of knowing exactly how the other took their coffee. They had built a life, a home, and a shared identity that was as solid and real as the ground beneath their feet. David was a history teacher, a man who lived in the past. Sarah was a landscape architect, a woman who designed futures. They were a perfect balance. One of their most cherished memories was a spontaneous trip to the desert, driving for hours just to lie on the hood of their car and watch a meteor shower. David would point out the constellations, telling their ancient stories, while Sarah simply absorbed the spectacle, dreaming of future gardens. Their memories were the invisible architecture of their relationship. They had no idea that a few seconds of screeching tires on a rainy Tuesday afternoon was about to demolish that foundation completely. When a person experiences a traumatic brain injury like David's, the brain can slam against the inside of the skull, causing widespread damage. In David's case, the impact was concentrated on his hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep within the brain. Now, the hippocampus isn't a dusty library where memories are stored forever. Think of it more like a librarian or a complex search engine. It's responsible for taking our short-term experiences, the sights, sounds, and emotions of a moment, and indexing them for long-term storage. When David's hippocampus was severely damaged, that librarian was, for all intents and purposes, erased. The event caused what is known as severe retrograde amnesia. Retrograde means backward looking. The trauma didn't just affect his memory of the accident, it wiped the slate clean. 25 years of his life, his entire history with Sarah, his wedding day, the birth of their 2 children, his career, his own parents, it all vanished. The doctors tried to prepare Sarah. They used terms like cognitive deficits and memory impairment. But nothing can prepare you for looking into the eyes of the person you love most in the world and seeing a polite stranger. She thought it had to be a temporary fog that would lift. So she brought the photos. She held up a picture of their wedding day, David and a younger Sarah beaming. She showed him a photo of him holding their firstborn, his face a perfect picture of terror and awe. She showed him the family on a beach vacation, sunburned and grinning. David's face, lying there in the hospital bed, remained blank. He studied the photos with a detached curiosity, like a historian examining artifacts from an unknown civilization. From his perspective, this very kind, very sad woman kept showing him pictures of a man who looked like him. This man was smiling, holding babies, kissing her. She said it was their house. She said they were their children, who were now grown and on their way to the hospital. He felt nothing. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. He felt this immense pressure to give her the recognition she was so desperate for, but there was just a void, an emptiness where 25 years of a life was supposed to be. For the next few months, Sarah's life became a desperate archaeological dig into her husband's lost mind. She took him home to the house he no longer recognized. She walked him through parks where they'd had their first dates, pointing out the bench where he'd first told her he loved her. She played their wedding song, Frank Sinatra's The Way You Look Tonight. David was patient, cooperative, but he was a ghost in his own life. The cruelty of his condition was in its specificity. While his episodic memory, the story of his life, was gone, his procedural memory remained largely intact. That's the how-to knowledge stored in a different part of the brain. He still knew how to tie his shoes, how to drive, even how to brew a perfect cup of coffee. He just didn't remember the thousands of mornings he'd spent making one for Sarah. He would move through their kitchen with an eerie, muscle memory confidence, but his face was tense with the effort of navigating a space that felt completely new. This is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of severe amnesia. The self is not a single entity, it's a collection of different memory systems. David's procedural self was still there. His semantic memory, his knowledge of facts like who the first president was also partially there. He was still an intelligent man. But his autobiographical self, the part that holds the narrative of I, was gone. Sarah was essentially living with the skills and knowledge of her husband, but without the person. The strain was immense. How do you care for a stranger who wears your husband's face? Sarah found herself reintroducing herself every single day, not because his memory reset, but because their shared context was gone. Every conversation was a first conversation. Every joke had no history. She mourned the loss of her husband while he sat right next to her. For David, it was a different kind of prison. He was surrounded by the evidence of a happy life but felt no ownership of it. He felt like an impostor. Then, one autumn afternoon, months after he came home, something changed. They were in the garden Sarah had designed. She was on her knees planting tulip bulbs, an act of faith in a spring she couldn't yet see. David had been watching her silently for nearly an hour. He wasn't just passively observing anymore. He was thinking. He asked a question. "You like these ones, don't you? The dahlias." Sarah stopped, her hands covered in soil. It was a simple observation, but it was the first one he'd made about her. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "They're my favorite." He looked at her, his brow furrowed in genuine curiosity, and asked, "Why?" It was a tiny question, but it was a monumental shift. For months, the information had all been one way. Sarah trying to pour David S. past back into his head. But this question wasn't about the past. It was about the present. It was about her. For the first time, David wasn't trying to remember who Sarah was. He was trying to learn who she was. In that moment, Sarah realized she had been trying to resurrect a ghost. She was so focused on getting her old David back that she wasn't seeing the man who was right in front of her. This new David, he was quieter, more observant. He was gentle and patient. So she stopped showing him old photo albums, and they started taking new pictures. A new montage of moments began to form, not dramatic, but small and meaningful. David watching Sarah sketch a new garden design, a look of genuine interest on his face. David putting on the Sinatra song, not because it was their song, but because he saw it made her smile, them laughing at a new joke, one that belonged only to this new, strange chapter of their lives. Their old life, built on decades of shared memories, was gone. But from the rubble, they started building something new. They started a second love story, from scratch, It wasn't about recovering what was lost, but about discovering what was there. It's a powerful reminder that love isn't just a memory of the past. It's a choice you make every single day in the present. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories about the incredible resilience of the human spirit. We'll see you in the next one.